Jessica was ready to give up hope. Her little girl hadn't spoken since the night her father died. But when a man she'd never met knelt by the swing and told her daughter to make the sound of clouds, Jessica couldn't believe what she heard next. The afternoon light sifted through the oak branches and laid a dappled pattern across the swing set. Jessica sat on the bench with her hands wrapped around the edge as if holding the day steady. On the second swing, Lily drifted back and forth, small sneakered feet tracing the same quiet arc, long brown hair lifting and settling like a soft flag. Willowbrook Park sounded alive, children laughing, chains creaking, but Jessica felt the hush between those sounds, the space where her daughter's voice used to live. At 34, Jessica knew how to read rooms and move meetings. She knew how to catch problems before they exploded. 200 people relied on her judgment every workday. Yet here, with the person who mattered most, her skill set failed her. There was nothing to negotiate with grief, nothing to optimize in a wound this deep. Lily had not spoken since the accident 18 months ago. The phrase still felt like a bruise when it crossed Jessica's mind, and no spreadsheet could shorten that distance. She had not sat idle. There were appointments, assessments, charts that concluded no physical impediment. There were toys arranged to invite conversation, picture cards that offered choices, spaces carefully built to feel safe. Speech therapy, child psychology, play-based approaches, each expert kind and confident, each session ending with gentle praise for Lily's participation and a soft, unspoken apology to Jessica. The verdict never wavered. The silence was emotional, a protective wall built by a child who had survived something too big for her size. So Jessica came here, again and again, because motion felt better than waiting at home for a miracle that wouldn't be scheduled. The park offered a rhythm she could keep. Coat on, water bottle, hair brushed, the same bench. Children swirled around Lily like birds milling around a statue. Sometimes a girl would offer a turn on the slide. Sometimes a boy would ask her name and move on without an answer. Lily never seemed distressed. She swung, climbed, accepted offers with nods, present but distant, her face brightening at moments, her eyes older than they should be. "Do you want me to push a little?" Jessica asked, voice low, careful not to load the question with hope. She stayed seated when Lily shook her head. The girl's hands tightened briefly on the chains, then loosened, the arc of the swing continuing at the same measured pace. Jessica let her own shoulders drop a notch. She reminded herself, again, that silence was still participation, that being here, together, counted. She pictured the last time she had heard Lily's laugh, how it had rung out from the back seat over a silly song on the radio. The memory arrived uninvited and complete, bringing with it a sudden sting behind her eyes. She blinked until the trees steadied and focused on what she could do now. Breathe, witness, be the one constant Lily could rely on. A boy on the monkey bars shouted triumphantly. A toddler clapped for herself at the bottom of the slide. The sounds of other children made Jessica's chest ache and ease at the same time. She watched Lily's profile for tiny cues, a press of lips, a blink held too long, markers she had learned to read in place of words. When a gust lifted Lily's hair and the girl tucked it behind her ear, the gesture felt like a sentence Jessica couldn't translate, only honor. "I brought your favorite snack." Jessica tried again, gentler still, "for when you're ready." She glanced at the tote by her feet and then back at Lily, careful not to turn even kindness into pressure. Some days Lily accepted, some days she didn't. Today, Lily's gaze stayed forward, following the slow swing of shadows across the mulch. The message was clear enough. Not yet. Beneath the bench, tiny acorns rolled against Jessica's shoe. She nudged one away and let her breath match the metronome of the chains. In, out, squeak, return. Each moment felt like a small vote for the future, an investment that would not show its yield until it was ready. She had learned to think that way, less in breakthroughs and more in accumulations. If recovery could be measured, it would be in these repetitions, in the way Lily kept choosing to be here, to move, to share space with other children even if she did not share sound. A cluster of leaves, sunlit at the tips, trembled high above. Jessica traced the motion as if it could tether her impatience. She wanted to tell her daughter about every ordinary thing. The cafe dog that always slept by the window, the receptionist with the rainbow bracelets, The neighbor's tomatoes that had finally gone red. Small talk as bridge, mundane as mercy. Instead, she settled on the one truth she could offer without complication. "I'm right here," she said, not expecting an answer. It felt less like a prompt and more like a promise. Around them, play continued to make its unself-conscious music. A girl in a purple jumper sprinted past. A father laughed at a joke only his child could have told. Jessica watched Lily's feet stretch toward the sky and return, stretch and return, as steady as tide. She didn't know what would change or when. She only knew why they kept coming. Because hope, like muscle, needed use to stay strong. Because showing up was something she could control. Because sometimes the next step was simply the same step, taken again. And so she held her post on the bench, guarding this quiet, believing that inside it something living was mending itself, slowly, invisibly, faithfully, until it felt safe to be heard. The air shifted when Jessica noticed a man approaching the swings, his pace unhurried, his presence unforced. He carried no briefcase, no phone, only the easy posture of someone who had spent afternoons like this before. Beside him, a girl skipped with the buoyant rhythm of a child at home in her own skin. She looked to be Lily's age, her blonde ponytail bouncing as she clutched a small stuffed rabbit by one arm. "Hi there," the man said as they reached the swing set. His voice was warm but not exaggerated, the kind of tone children trusted because it didn't try too hard. "I'm Michael, and this is my daughter, Emma. Would you mind if Emma used the swing next to you?" He aimed the question at Lily, not at Jessica, a small detail that caught Jessica's attention immediately. Most adults would glance at the parent, waiting for approval, but Michael placed the choice in Lily's hands. Lily lifted her eyes, cautious but curious. She glanced at Emma, who smiled openly, the kind of smile that seemed to spill light. After a pause, Lily gave a polite nod and looked back toward the ground, continuing her measured swing. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. Even that small acknowledgement felt like progress. "Thanks," Michael said gently, as though the nod carried weight. Emma clambered onto the adjacent swing with practiced energy, legs already pumping before she settled fully into the seat. "I love swings," she declared to the air. "They make me feel like I'm flying. Do you like to feel like you're flying too?" Her words tumbled out in a rush, natural and unguarded. Jessica leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on Lily. She saw something stir in her daughter's face, a flicker of something she hadn't seen in weeks. Lily's lips curved, not into a full smile but close, enough to reveal the faintest dimples. Jessica swallowed hard, willing herself not to interrupt, not to make this fragile moment about her own excitement. Emma's chatter continued, filling the silence around Lily with a kind of effortless companionship. She described the way the wind pushed against her cheeks, how the ground looked smaller with each swing upward, how she imagined herself flying over rooftops and trees. Each phrase was like an invitation tossed into the space between the girls. Michael stood behind Emma, steadying her with gentle pushes, but his gaze occasionally drifted toward Lily. His words were casual, conversational, as though silence were not a problem to be solved, but simply one version of communication. "That's a beautiful dress you're wearing," he remarked to Lily. "Pink is my favorite color. Emma loves it too, even though she's wearing purple today." Jessica's chest tightened. He spoke to her daughter as if nothing were wrong, as if her quiet was not a deficit, but just another way of being. The absence of pressure was startling. Jessica realized how often, even with the best intentions, she had asked Lily to try, to say, to practice. Michael didn't ask, he simply shared space, offering words without demand. Emma tilted her head back, swinging higher. "Daddy, can you show her the secret trick you taught me?" she called, her voice bubbling with excitement. Jessica saw Michael's grin spread across his face, unguarded and genuine. He crouched slightly so that both girls could see him, his presence open and accessible. "I suppose I could," he replied, his tone playful, "if she'd like to learn. It's a very special technique that makes swinging even more fun." His eyes flicked to Lily, and Jessica followed the direction of that gaze. Lily's hands gripped the chains a little tighter, her feet pausing mid-swing. Her eyes lit up, not with words, not yet, but with unmistakable interest. She gave the smallest nod, careful and deliberate, the kind of gesture a child makes when testing trust. Jessica felt her heart lurch. She had been bringing Lily here for months, hoping the air of children would loosen something inside her. And now, in the space of a few casual exchanges, a man she had never met had drawn out more light from her daughter than weeks of professional sessions. She sat very still, as if moving too quickly might scatter the fragile beginnings of connection forming before her eyes. The bench felt suddenly less like a place of waiting and more like a front row seat to something shifting. For the first time in many months, Jessica felt her watchfulness turn into a quiet anticipation. Something was happening, unexpected, unplanned, and gently extraordinary. Emma kicked her legs with abandon, her laughter ringing across the playground. "Daddy, show her the trick. Show her the trick," she urged, gripping the chains and leaning back as though she could propel herself into the sky by sheer determination. Michael chuckled, then planted his feet firmly in the mulch. "All right, but you both have to pay close attention," he said, lowering his voice into a tone that suggested he was letting them in on something secret. He looked first at Emma, then at Lily, and waited. Jessica noticed that he didn't rush to fill the pause. He gave Lily the same consideration as his daughter, as though silence deserved as much space as chatter. Lily's swing slowed slightly, the soles of her sneakers brushing the ground. Her eyes flicked from Emma to Michael, a silent question resting in them. Jessica's heart tightened at that look. She had seen it before, usually in therapy sessions, curiosity held captive by hesitation. "The secret," Michael began, holding out his arms like a conductor, "is that you're not just swinging. You're flying through the clouds. And when you fly through clouds, you have to make the sound that clouds make." Emma burst out in a giggle. "Like this, Daddy." She drew in a dramatic breath and exhaled a playful whoosh that carried across the park. Her whole body leaned into the sound as her swing arced higher. She let out another whoosh, louder, and announced, "I'm flying through a rainbow cloud." Michael added his own version, softer and rhythmic. "Whoosh, whoosh, like the wind in the trees," he demonstrated, pumping his legs slightly to match the cadence. His voice wasn't exaggerated, just steady and believable, as though he really heard the clouds answering back. Jessica's throat constricted. She glanced at Lily, who had stilled almost completely, her fingers curled tightly around the chains. Her lips parted a fraction, as if she wanted to mimic the sound, but fear, or habit, pulled her back into quiet. Michael noticed. Without changing his tone, he continued, "The best part about cloud flying is that everyone has their own sound. Some people whoosh, some hum like bees, some whisper like the wind in the grass. There isn't a wrong way. The clouds welcome every voice." Jessica bit the inside of her cheek, holding back the urge to speak, to coax, to intervene. She had done that too many times already, and each time Lily had retreated further behind her wall. What Michael was offering wasn't instruction, it was permission. Permission to exist without performance. Emma leaned forward, hair flying behind her, still producing cheerful whooshes. "Come on," she encouraged, looking sideways at Lily. "We can fly together." Lily's swing rocked faintly, not from her own effort, but from the momentum Emma created beside her. Jessica could see the struggle carved in her daughter's features, a yearning to join balanced against the weight of silence she had carried for a year and a half. Michael crouched then, settling onto the ground in front of Lily so that he could meet her eyes directly. His expression was gentle but unwavering, as if to say, "I see you. I'll wait." "You know what?" he said softly, his voice dropping low enough that only Lily and Jessica could hear. "Sometimes even clouds need a little magic before they let out their sound. I think I might have just the thing." He tapped his pocket with a playful smile, though there was no showmanship in it, only sincerity. Lily's head tilted ever so slightly. A crease formed between her brows, not in fear but in attention. Jessica exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath through the whole exchange. Something in the air felt balanced on a knife's edge. She had sat through countless sessions where therapists promised breakthroughs, but never before had she sensed her daughter standing so close to one. Here, in a park, with a stranger and his little girl spinning stories about clouds. For the first time in months, hope didn't feel like a distant concept Jessica had to remind herself to believe in. It felt present, alive, circling them in the whooshing sounds of swings and laughter, waiting to see if Lily would reach for it. Michael's hand slipped into his pocket, and when it emerged he held a small, smooth stone no larger than a robin's egg. Its surface caught the afternoon light, flecks of pale gray shimmering as he turned it between his fingers. "This," he said, voice calm and deliberate, "is a magic stone. I found it by the ocean a long time ago. When you hold it and let even the tiniest sound out, it makes your voice strong enough to fly higher than the clouds." He knelt so that he was eye level with Lily, his hand open like an invitation rather than an expectation. Jessica felt her heart slam against her ribs. Every instinct in her body told her to lean forward, to urge Lily to take it, but she stayed still, her fingers digging into the wooden bench beneath her. This moment wasn't hers to direct. Lily's eyes, wide and unblinking, fixed on the stone. Her swing had slowed nearly to a stop, toes brushing the mulch. For a long stretch of seconds, she didn't move, only breathed. Then, almost imperceptibly, she released one hand from the chain and extended it toward Michael. He placed the stone in her palm with careful precision, folding her small fingers around it as though sealing a promise. "It works best," he said softly. "If you close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let whatever sound wants to come out, come out. There's no right or wrong." Jessica's own breath caught. She pressed a hand against her mouth, afraid even the sound of it might shatter the fragile bubble forming around her daughter. Lily clutched the stone as though it were something rare and alive. Her lashes fluttered, then settled against her cheeks as she obeyed Michael's instructions. The swing creaked faintly in the silence, Emma still whooshing cheerfully beside her, creating the rhythm of play as background music to this hushed suspense. Jessica's pulse thundered in her ears. She had prayed for this moment for 18 months, had dreamed of it at night only to wake with the sting of disappointment. Her daughter's silence had felt endless, like a tunnel without a light. Now, with her eyes closed and a stone pressed into her hand, Lily looked as though she were standing on the threshold of something Jessica had thought she might never see again. Then it happened, so faintly that Jessica almost doubted her own ears. A tiny breath of sound slipped out. Whoosh. It was barely louder than a whisper, fragile as a moth's wing brushing glass. But it was sound. Lily's sound. Her voice returned. Jessica's entire body jolted. Tears sprang instantly, hot and unstoppable, and her hand pressed harder against her lips to keep in the sob that rose with them. She felt her vision blur but couldn't look away, couldn't miss a single detail of this miracle. Michael's face lit with an unguarded joy that felt as real as Jessica's grief. He didn't overreact, didn't cheer or clap. He simply nodded with reverence. "Perfect," he said softly, as if honoring something sacred. "That was beautiful cloud flying. You're a natural." Lily's eyes flew open, searching his face, then darting to Emma, who squealed in delight. "She did it. She's flying through the clouds too." Emma cried, pumping her legs harder so her swing soared higher, as if to celebrate her new companion in the sky. Lily's cheeks flushed, the color of dawn, and she drew in another breath. Whoosh! This time it was louder, still delicate, but no longer tentative. The sound carried clearly enough that Jessica swore the trees themselves leaned in to listen. Each repetition seemed to carve new pathways, undoing months of silence in small, steady strokes. Lily clutched the stone tighter, her hair flying as she pumped her legs in rhythm, her voice growing braver. The sound of her laughter, thin but unmistakably laughter, joined the whooshing chorus of Emma and Michael, filling the space Jessica had thought might remain empty forever. On the bench, Jessica bowed her head, her shoulders trembling with the force of her sobs. Relief and gratitude surged through her like a flood. For the first time since the accident, hope was no longer something she rehearsed. It was something she heard, alive in her daughter's voice. The rhythm of the swings filled the air, chains creaking, children laughing, Emma's gleeful chatter mixing with Lily's tentative whooshes. Each repetition grew stronger, braver, until Jessica could no longer deny what her ears and heart told her. Her daughter's silence was cracking open. Jessica rose slowly from the bench, legs unsteady, afraid that moving too quickly might disturb the fragile miracle unfolding before her. She took a few careful steps toward the swings, her eyes locked on Lily. Her daughter's hair streamed behind her, her cheeks flushed from effort and excitement. For the first time in 18 months, she looked not just present but alive, unburdened. Then it happened. The sound Jessica had longed for, dreamed of, wept for in private moments when no therapist could reassure her. Lily's voice lifted above the creak of the chains, clear and bright. "Mama!" The word rang out like a bell, sharp and unmistakable. Lily's small hands gripped the chains, her face breaking into a smile so radiant Jessica thought her knees might give way. "Mama, I'm flying through clouds." "Listen." Jessica's hand shot to her mouth as a sob escaped anyway. Tears blurred her vision until she saw nothing but shapes and color, but she didn't care. She stumbled the last steps and dropped to her knees beside the swing, reaching for Lily as though anchoring herself to reality. "I hear you, sweetheart," she whispered through the torrent of emotion. "I hear you. You sound absolutely beautiful." Lily slowed her swing just enough to lean into her mother's arms. Jessica cradled her tightly, her tears soaking into the soft fabric of her daughter's dress. She felt the warm tremor of Lily's breath against her shoulder and listened to the precious sound of her voice echoing still in her memory. Emma clapped from the neighboring swing, kicking her legs proudly as though she, too, had achieved the feat. "She did it, Daddy," she said, "Mama." Michael rose from where he had crouched in the mulch, brushing his hands lightly against his jeans. His smile was gentle, unintrusive. He didn't claim the moment, didn't draw attention to himself. Instead, he gave Jessica and Lily space, his eyes watching with quiet satisfaction, like someone who had simply nudged open a door and stepped aside. Jessica looked up at him, gratitude pouring from her expression even before words could form. Her voice shook as she said, "Thank you. I don't know how you did that, but you just gave me back my daughter." Michael's gaze softened, though he shook his head lightly. "I didn't do anything special," he replied. Lily was ready. She just needed to know it was safe. He glanced at the stone still clutched in Lily's hand. "Sometimes we all need a little magic to remember who we are." Jessica pressed her cheek against Lily's hair, inhaling the familiar scent of shampoo and playground air, her tears still falling freely. She felt as though she had been carrying a weight so heavy it bent her spine, and now, in this moment, it had been lifted, not gone, but bearable again. "Mama," Lily said once more, almost testing the word, savoring it. This time Jessica laughed through her tears. "Yes, my love," she answered, holding her tighter. "I'm right here." The weeks that followed felt different, lighter, as though the air itself had shifted. Jessica found herself returning to Willowbrook Park not out of obligation or routine, but out of something closer to anticipation. Each time she and Lily arrived, they found Michael and Emma already near the swings or waiting at the sandbox. It became an unspoken rhythm, a pattern that settled naturally into all their lives. Emma and Lily grew inseparable almost instantly. Emma's chatter provided a constant soundtrack, while Lily's words, still hesitant at first, slipped in like careful brushstrokes on a canvas. Jessica marveled at how her daughter seemed to borrow courage from her new friend's boundless energy. When Emma suggested playing house under the slide, Lily whispered, "Okay." When Emma invented rules for a game of tag, Lily followed with a soft laugh. Jessica noticed that Michael never pressed Lily to speak. He let her set the pace, responding to every nod, every gesture, as though they were complete sentences. "You don't rush a flower to bloom," he said once when Jessica apologized for Lily's lingering quiet. His tone wasn't reproachful, just matter of fact. "You water it, give it sun, and wait." One breezy afternoon, while their daughters knelt in the sandbox building uneven castles, Jessica finally asked the question that had been circling her mind. "How did you know what to do with her that day? With the stone?" Michael smiled, his gaze resting on the children. "I'm a music therapist," he explained. "I work with kids who've gone through trauma. Sometimes the hardest part is helping them trust their own sound again. The stone isn't magic, not really. But believing in magic can be the first brave step." Jessica felt her throat tighten. She had spent months searching for solutions, consulting specialists who spoke in careful, clinical terms. And here was a man who had knelt in the dirt with her daughter, offered a story, and created space for hope to return. She looked at him then, not just as a fellow parent, but as someone who understood the language of healing in ways no textbook could capture. Their conversations lengthened with each visit. Sometimes they spoke of practical things, schools, playground renovations, the difficulty of balancing work and parenting alone. Other times, Michael shared small stories of his sessions, a boy who found his courage in drumming, a girl who relearned laughter by singing to her cat. Jessica listened, absorbing each anecdote as if it were a blueprint for resilience. Lily still had quiet days. Jessica would wake to find her daughter wordless again, weighed down by memories no child should carry. But those days no longer felt like endless defeats. With Michael's encouragement and Emma's constant presence, Lily always returned to her voice, sometimes whispering, sometimes laughing, slowly rebuilding the fragile bridge between silence and expression. One afternoon, Jessica caught sight of Lily and Emma holding hands at the top of the slide, whispering to each other. Lily's words were halting, but they were hers. Jessica pressed her palm against her chest, overwhelmed by the realization that her daughter was learning to live again, piece by piece, sound by sound. Later, as the sun dipped low and the girls raced across the grass, Jessica turned to Michael. "You've given her something no one else could," she said quietly. Michael shook his head. "She already had it," he replied. "I just reminded her it was safe to let it out." Jessica studied his face in the fading light and felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through her. Something like gratitude, but deeper, steadier. For the first time since the accident, she believed the future could hold more than survival. It could hold joy. 6 months later, Jessica sat in the crowded auditorium of Willowbrook Elementary, her heart hammering in her chest. The folding chair beneath her felt insubstantial, as though it couldn't possibly carry the weight of her anticipation. Around her, parents murmured with programs in hand, craning for a better view of the stage decorated with painted butterflies and paper suns. Beside her, Michael sat with the same calm presence he had shown at the playground, though his eyes followed every movement at the front with quiet alertness. Emma waved from the risers, grinning so wide her cheeks dimpled. Next to her stood Lily, a pink ribbon tied carefully in her hair. Her hands clutched the edges of her music sheet, knuckles pale, but her chin was lifted, her posture steady. Jessica's throat ached at the sight. Months earlier, she had begged for a single word. Now, her daughter was about to sing in front of an audience. It felt impossible, a leap so vast, she almost couldn't trace the path that had carried them here. The music teacher tapped her stand. Children shifted, papers rustling. Jessica clasped her hands together in her lap, whispering a silent prayer. She remembered the first tentative whoosh on the swing, the fragile whisper that had cracked open months of silence. And now there was this. The piano began softly. Emma nudged Lily with her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance, and Jessica caught the briefest smile tug at her daughter's lips. Then the girls opened their mouths. Lily's voice rose clear and certain, blending with Emma's in a duet about butterflies and sunshine. The notes were simple, the lyrics childlike, but to Jessica it sounded like an anthem. Each word was a reclamation, each sustained note a triumph. She felt her tears gathering, unstoppable, but she didn't hide them. She wanted Lily to see, if she looked out, how proud her mother was. Michael's hand rested lightly over hers. She glanced sideways and saw his expression, gentle pride, but also something steadier, deeper. He wasn't surprised by Lily's courage. He had believed in it long before Jessica dared to. When the song ended, the auditorium filled with applause. Jessica clapped furiously, rising to her feet as Lily bowed with Emma, her cheeks glowing with pride. For the first time in nearly 2 years, Jessica saw her daughter radiant not only with survival, but with joy. "You know," Jessica said softly to Michael as the applause swelled around them, "I used to think losing her voice was the worst thing that could have happened after losing her father." Michael turned, his hand still over hers. "And now," Jessica swallowed, watching Lily beam on stage, shoulders squared, her ribbon catching the stage light. "Now I understand that sometimes we have to lose our voice before we can discover what we really have to say." Michael squeezed her hand gently, not in triumph, but in solidarity. Together, they watched as their daughters left the stage, walking side by side, their laughter carrying even above the applause. The crowd slowly filtered out of the school auditorium, voices buzzing with congratulations and proud laughter. Jessica lingered near the doorway, her hand still clasped in Lily's. She couldn't stop glancing down at her daughter, as if needing constant proof that the girl walking beside her was the same one who had once retreated into silence. Lily skipped a little as she held her music sheet, her cheeks flushed with triumph. Outside, the late spring evening was cool, the sky streaked with pink and lavender. The air carried the scent of freshly cut grass, mingling with the excited chatter of children rushing toward their parents. Emma caught up to Lily, grabbing her hand with the same easy confidence she always had, and together they darted a few paces ahead, comparing their favorite moments from the recital. Their voices, clear and unself-conscious, floated back toward the adults like music still echoing from the stage. Jessica walked beside Michael, her steps unhurried. The moment felt too important to rush. She thought back to that day at the playground, the creak of the swings, the whooshes in the air, the way Michael had crouched to meet Lily's eyes. That chance encounter had split her life into before and after. "Do you ever think about how small moments change everything?" Jessica asked, her voice low, reflective. Michael smiled faintly, watching the girls run ahead. "All the time. The smallest acts can turn into the biggest shifts. A sound, a story, even a stone in your pocket." Jessica followed his gaze. "She still keeps it," she murmured. "The stone? Yes. It's on her nightstand. Every night, she makes sure it's there." Jessica's eyes softened. "It isn't magic, I know, but it reminds her that she can be brave, that she already was." Michael nodded. "That's the real magic. Believing you can." Jessica let the words settle. She thought of Lily's laughter blending with Emma's, the duet about butterflies and sunshine, the strength in her daughter's small voice. She realized she no longer measured progress by milestones marked on charts or by the expectations of specialists. She measured it by the way Lily's hand fit confidently in her own, by the sound of her name called out in joy, "Mama." They reached the edge of the parking lot, where families parted ways. Jessica crouched to hug Lily, brushing a stray ribbon from her daughter's hair. "You were wonderful," she whispered. Lily grinned shyly, but instead of shrinking back into silence, she whispered back, "Thank you, Mama." The words were small, but they were steady. As they walked to the car, Jessica reflected on the long path that had led them here. Healing had not come in a sudden sweep, but in fragments, moments of trust, of play, of patience. It had come through Emma's laughter, Michael's gentleness, and the courage Lily had found when she believed her voice mattered. Jessica tightened her hold on her daughter's hand and glanced once more at Michael, who walked a few paces away with Emma. She realized that their families, once strangers bound only by circumstance, had grown into something more, companions in recovery, witnesses to each other's resilience. Sometimes, Jessica thought, the most powerful magic is simply knowing someone believes in your ability to fly again. And sometimes the greatest gift is having the patience to wait until the wings are ready. That night, when Lily placed the smooth stone carefully back on her nightstand, Jessica watched in silence. It was not the stone itself, but what it represented: the courage to let a voice be heard, the strength to step back into the world, and the reminder that even after the darkest silence, hope could return, softly, steadily, like the whisper of a cloud.